Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Shavi. I'm the host for today, and I lead a very special community and product effort at Microsoft to help build better community products and democratize AI learning across different professional communities. If you want to learn more about the initiative, you can subscribe to our newsletter with the link below to learn more about our initiative and get access to key takeaways and recording from today's event. I know today's pretty special. We're actually joined streaming from four different sources. There's people coming from Maven, Lightning Lessons, people coming from LinkedIn, people coming from the AI enthusiast community calendar, and then as well as both Colin and my LinkedIn connection. So for those who are joining us today, feel free to drop in the chats and the comments where you're joining us from. Feel free to share your LinkedIn profile if you want to connect with each other. And let's make this a very interactive space. Throughout this session today, we'll do some pretty exciting demo, and I know that's why you're here. Feel free to ask Colin any questions you might have. So drop them in the chat. So before we get started, I just want to do a couple housekeeping. I'm excited to share a little bit more about the AI Community Learning Program and Learning Series with you, which might be new for many of you. Our goal here is to help you navigate the world of AI, whether you are a product manager, designer, marketer, or in any other roles that are being disrupted by AI, which is probably virtually every role. We're trying to dive deeper with industry leaders and practitioners and share actionable insights and takeaways to make AI more accessible and impactful in your day-to-day life and work. Again, a quick reminder, if you want to receive recap of today's session, access to recording, and other goodies that will be shared throughout the session, and stay up to date with future events, make sure you subscribe to our newsletter in the link below. We have sessions almost every Friday and every week, so hope to see many of you there. Now, let me say hi to a couple folks. Yes, this session will be recorded. I know that's going to be the number one asked question. We have folks joining us from Florida, Clifton from Miami, folks from Texas, London, India, Brazil, Italy, Colorado, Paris, France, Canada, Mumbai, South Africa. Wow, this is a really, really, really international crowd. Thank you so much, folks. Please continue to introduce yourself. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest, honorary guest of today, Colin Matthews. Hi, Colin.
Hey,
Thanks for joining
hey,
us.
everyone. How's it going?
So, Colin is a product manager, educator, and AI prototyping experts. I can't believe you said this. You said after struggling with technical skills early in your career, you went on to sell your first SaaS products in 2021. But today, you actually teaches product managers AI prototyping and technical foundations on Maven and helping over 8,500 students learn how to leverage AI tools to help ship software faster. And I know I cannot imagine a better person than you to teach product managers prototyping skills, because you've been featured by Lanny, by Akash Gupta, some of the best, most loved product influencers and thinkers out there in the world. Your mission is to empower non-technical professionals to turn their ideas into working software without coding. Without further ado, Colin, show us some of your magic, maybe. And then
Yeah,
also, Colin teaches a course, as we mentioned, on Maven, AI prototyping for PMs. So for those who are interested, feel free to check it out. I think the next cohort is coming up in April. So we have a little bit more time for folks to, prime their minds, get ready for the cohort.
yeah, for sure. We'll do a bit of an overview today. Well, obviously focusing on Figma first. I'll talk a little bit about what are the skills that we cover. If you're interested in learning those skills, then you can check it out. If not, that's totally cool too. Obviously, I publish semi-regularly on Substack and other places, so there's lots of ways to learn about this from me and from other folks online who are in the space. And yeah, we'll go ahead and get started. I guess just one quick thing. Shout out to the other Canadians. I'm also Canadian, so hey. But yeah, we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen and we'll hop in. All right, looks like we are live. So yeah, I'm going to do a brief overview of our agenda here, just to orient you all. there's a lot of topics that we could cover, so we'll see how much time we have. Obviously, we're going to start off with the Figma imports. So we're going to be taking a look at V0, Lovable, and Bolt. These are three separate tools that all support Figma imports, and they're all a little bit different. So you'll see examples of that. We'll talk briefly about deploying and then debugging and kind of like prompting skills. And then if we have time, we'll talk a little bit about team adoption as well. And one of the more common questions is probably going to be choosing your tooling. So there's a great article that I wrote with Lenny on this. I recommend going and taking a look at it if you want a more in-depth guide on this. But this is the nice kind of like summary or visual from that article. So as mentioned, we're going to be using these three tools here, V0, Bolt, and Lovable. They all support Figma imports, and they also all support a variety of features like running servers, deploying to the internet, connecting to external databases if you want to. And for most PMs and designers, this would be the space that I'd recommend that you play in, rather than using things like Cursor or Windsurf that are a tad more technical, or like ChatGPT or Claude that you can do basic prototyping in, but you really can't get that far. So we're gonna have two prototypes for today. I have this very, very basic one. The reason I have this is to show you more about the workflow. I don't want you to be too like impressed with the visuals right away. And so I thought maybe we'll start with something simple and I'll just show you how it all works. And then second, I have a second one that's a bit more visually impressive, and we'll walk through that one as well. And maybe you'll see like just how far you can push some of these Figma imports. And yeah, we'll go ahead and get started. I mean, generally speaking, it's pretty straightforward. It seems complicated, but it's really not. So over in V0, we'll start with that one. You can see that you have, your just regular kind of project start process here. And one of the buttons you have is import from Figma. So you do have to connect your V0 account to Figma. So there's a process in the settings here. I'll just show you briefly in mine that I have mine connected down to the bottom. See the integrations there. So you connect to your account and then, as mentioned, import from Figma. Over in Figma, you just have to select the relevant content that you want to bring over. So if I select this frame here, go copy and paste and copy link to selection, then I'll go ahead and grab that. And this is an important part. You don't want to grab like that PNG or anything like that. You want to actually grab the link to the selection there in Figma and then paste over in here. And that's it. I know it sounds complicated, but it's really not. There are a couple of nuances. So I'll talk through those nuances as V0 works through this initial kind of mock-up for us. So each tool uses Figma differently, and I'll describe it in more detail as we go through each one. V0 specifically, what it does is it takes a screenshot of your Figma mock, and then it does a design analysis on top of that. So you can see in this little thinking section here that it can grab, for example, the colors from our context, and then it shows, a little bit about what the design is. So a report generator that has these things. Importantly, this does not necessarily look through like every single frame or element in your Figma design. It is doing it like a more of a general summary. And so you'll see that reflected in the result over on the right-hand side. I mean, I'll just flip back really quick so you can see. It's basically one-to-one, right? So we have this very quick conversion from Figma to a functional prototype. The part of like functional prototype here and why this is maybe interesting to PMs and designers is one, like this actually works now, right? So if I click on this, I can, enter a date, or I can, select a different format from this dropdown and so on. So you can continue to iterate on this from the baseline. But two is also like, actually getting this out to a user and seeing what they think, or internal communication, right? Like if you're a PM and you have an idea for this, report generation feature, you can share this with your engineering team, you can share it with the design team, and this can become an artifact that you use for communication, right? So those are the two kind of primary use cases for prototyping. It's, communication to users or communication to internal stakeholders. And if we wanted to, we can actually make this a bit more, let's say, interactive. So I can say something like, add mock data for a report for me. And generally I'd say like something a bit more verbose here, something like I want to be able to download a report in a CSV format that has these columns and all that stuff. So that's one quick tip just while we're kind of working through this, is being more specific is better. If I add something like this, add mock data for a report, there's basically like, some random chance that's going to be what I want and some chance that it's not, because I'm really not giving it a specific direction in terms of what I'm looking for here. And then, yeah, we'll get kind of a second iteration, as you can see, where it's going to add some mock data for us. And then we'll be able to hopefully download that data and see that the report generation is working. So we'll let V0 work on that for a second. And, this does all take a little bit of time, as you can see. It's not necessarily instant. And so, it has to kind of work through deciding what changes to make and then applying those changes as needed. And then, yeah, hopefully we get our updated one, and then we'll move over to Bolt in just a second to do the same thing. Just give it one more second here. This would actually be a great time for a question if there are any questions so far.
Yeah, quick one, Colin, for or this one. Why did you choose V0? Like, what's the difference between the sort of the tools at the high level?
Sure, yeah. So V0, Bolt, and Lovable all sit in a very similar space, which is they are cloud, kind of like cloud development tools or cloud environments that we can use. So we don't have to set anything up on our computer, but they can also generate, multiple files as needed. They can deploy to the internet as needed, and so on. So I would say for the purpose of Figma conversions, there isn't necessarily a huge difference between V0, Lovable, and Bolt. There's other features that they each have that you might make your choice based on, but for this specific use case they're actually not that different. You'll see there is some difference in quality at times in terms of the Figma conversion, but that's about it. And then, yeah, you can see, so we got some generated reports now, right? And if I click download here, we should be able to get a report here. So let's give this a try. We'll say test, and we'll put in a date. We'll select the format as let's just say text, and we'll click download. Let's see if this works. And yeah, it looks like we're not getting our download here, but maybe we just have to, take this one step further. As I mentioned, being more specific is definitely better. So if I wanted to, I'd have to kind of like read through this. So, we have the download report, added state management, and then, yeah, I'd have to do something like, can you make it so I can actually download these reports and so on. So maybe we'll come back to that and do that. I want to make sure I'm respectful of time so we can get through all the content. So this is maybe a good intro to V0. We'll do a very similar workflow with Bolt. So if I go over to copy the link once more, in Bolt, I mean, it's almost identical, right? So we copy and paste the URL, we click import Figma frame into Bolt, and then we go through a very similar process. One thing that is different about Bolt is that they have integrated with a third party. So you can see down here, it says powered by Anima. And so the results are a bit different. If you want some opinion, I found that Bolt so far, out of the set of 3 that we'll look at, does the best job of doing like a one-to-one conversion of something that looks like a real prototype. And I'll show you an example of that later on. And so you get different mileage. I would highly encourage you try this. You play around with it yourself. Don't just like watch me do it and not try yourself. But in my personal opinion, I've seen Bolt do the best in terms of these conversions. And then, yeah, we'll end up with a very similar state where we have our Figma import into Bolt, right? So almost identical. And then
I think, Colin, we have a couple questions around like, is there a specific format or best practice for like how the Figma should look at the level of details before you like import them into V0?
Yeah, so when you do the import, basically you want the Figma design to be set up correctly. And what I mean by that is that like you don't have a bunch of screenshots that make it look like your thing is in Figma, but it's actually not. Like you've, ideally used the auto layout feature in Figma if you're familiar with that. So generally speaking, you just want to follow like Figma best practices in terms of the design. So I have like all these different groups of content here and so on. But beyond that, not specifically. Just yeah, I would avoid screenshots for like the majority. You want the actual UI elements to be represented because that's what it's looking at.
Ah, I see, I see. And how do you deal with like if there's like multiple screens and like a full user journey? Like, do you do it multiple times? Do you do it in one go?
Yeah,
Yeah.
great question. So right now, none of these tools support importing more than one Figma design. So you can't do like a multi-step workflow from Figma directly. But what I will say is that the most value that you get out of the Figma import is not necessarily the one-to-one replication of the UI, but it's actually like importing the design system. So how things
Mm.
should look. And from there, you can continue with just screenshots and regular prompting. And so I can show you an example of that maybe in the Bolt one. So if we go back over to here, we have, our initial import here. And if I say like, add a new page that is a dashboard, it should link to our report generation page. I'll say set up routing properly, use mock data. And here I'll show you one other tip that I often say in these types of sessions, which is make a plan, don't write any code. The reason I do this is because I want to see generally what the AI is going to output before it outputs it, because it allows me to confirm that, basically what the plan is matches what I want. And a lot of the time where people run into trouble is they throw in a prompt, very similar to what I did actually in V0, without having any idea about what that prompt is going to result in. And then, when it's not working the way you expected, as it didn't work for me the way I expected, then you kind of get a little bit frustrated. You're like, no, it's not working, blah, blah, blah. But really the problem was there was just no plan. You were not specific enough. And so either you need to be specific in the prompt, or you need to take a strategy like this where the AI actually generates the plan for you. Either of those is fine, but being more specific is definitely better. So I'm just going to do this a quick read. And then, we'll say, please implement following the existing design system. We should get something that looks generally like our report generator, but obviously it's, dashboard instead. And, as I mentioned, if we actually had any other Figma design in here that we wanted for like the dashboard, I would include that as a screenshot. So I'd follow a very similar approach, but include the screenshot as well. And then we'd get something that looks pretty similar.
Yeah, I know there are a few questions about folks who might not have a Figma wireframe. So we started out with Figma wireframe as the entry point to this whole workflow. But I know in Colin's courses, he's going to go into like, if you just have a PRD, if you just have an idea, not even PRD, like different entry points to prototyping with AI. So Figma wireframe is one of the common ones for PMs who work with a lot of UI features. So that's why we purposely selected that as the demo use case.
Yeah, exactly. So now in this one, we have our dashboard. If I click new report, you can see I get routed over to the report generator. But generally speaking, the UI here matches a similar styling. So, we can kind of, as mentioned, continue with a design system, and getting that design system right at the beginning is the most important part. And from there, you can be less specific about, every single design element because the AI generally has an idea of how it should look from that initial Figma import. And then, just to kind of reiterate that point there's lots of different ways to start. But if you are PM working in an existing company with existing products and you want to test different ideas, as mentioned, either with users or communicate internally, then Figma is a great place to start because it just kind of removes a little bit of the barrier of like people looking at it being like, oh, this isn't really our product. You can make it look very much like your product if you wanted to. And then, I'll just show you the last one here, which is Lovable. So Lovable requires a little bit of a different workflow. I would say it's a tad more complex just in how it works, but it's not any worse per se. So what we want to do here is once again select our frame, and then we have the Figma plugins down at the bottom, and we want to run the plugin for, I believe it's builder.io, as you can see here. And builder.io is a third-party application that has an integration with Lovable. So very similar to Bolt using a third party for the Figma conversion. This is the exact same pattern. It's just that it's not directly through the Lovable website. In order to do this, you have to run the Figma plugin inside of Figma. And then you'll see that in a second here, we get an option which is to export into Lovable, and then that will load the content into Lovable. So, once again, you kind of have three options in terms of your preference. V0, as I mentioned, takes a screenshot and then tries to reproduce based on like the design elements that it has. Bolt does use a third party, and I found it's pretty accurate. And then Lovable uses a third party as well, also pretty accurate. Once again, if you ask my preference right now, it's probably Bolt out of the three, just because I've had the best experience in terms of like that one-to-one conversion, making it look exactly like what you want. But you'll have different mileage depending on what you're trying to do here. So with this one here, we get three different options in terms of like which one we like, which one we want to pick. They all look very similar to me, to be honest. So I'll just pick the first one here. And then we can see we have this open in Lovable button. And then once again, we have a little bit of a wait here while it exports over to Lovable, but very, very similar process. So we'll let that run for a second. And if there's any other questions, it's a good time.
And Colin, I just want to share, this will make you very proud because Shia from the community just followed along and created a working prototype in V0 in less than a minute.
Perfect.
So this
that's
is
awesome.
Really awesome. For those who are asking how to get started, this is how you get started. Just go and try, use a prompt. That's awesome. I know that later, Colin, you'll demo how to deploy because we have a couple questions of like, how do you access the prototype? How do you share it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, you know what? While we're waiting for Lovable here, why don't we go ahead and give that a try? So again, one of the reasons I recommend these tools, kind of like that middle tier, as I mentioned, is that they have a deploy button or a function built directly into them. You don't need to figure out how to deploy this to the internet. You click deploy in the top right corner. And they're all pretty much the same. So you click deploy there, or you click deploy there, or you'll see in Lovable, it's exactly the same. You click deploy. So it's extremely simple to deploy to the internet. What'll happen is it'll give you a link that's connected to Netlify. So just in case you're unfamiliar, Netlify is basically a web hosting platform. And you'll see, I have this little link here. If I want to, I could go set up a custom domain or something like that. But that's it. So now I have this public link. If you wanted to, you could go check it out. It's on the internet now. And yeah, so it's extremely simple. And then from here, you could share that link again internally with customers, with whomever you want. The only other thing I'll add here is I've gotten questions on this in the past, is like, okay, if this is a public link, does that mean anyone can access it? And for more enterprise EPMs, that's a bit of an issue. So one thing you can do is you can ask Bolt or whatever tool to wrap the whole thing in a password. It's not extremely secure. Like someone could still figure out that password because all the code is deployed on the internet. The password is literally inside the files, but it is a bit of a deterrent in that like anyone who goes to that link is going to see that they need to enter a password. And so, it's just a little bit of like I said, a deterrent to seeing the UI. So I could just do something like, please wrap this entire app in a password container. Don't display the password. And yeah, that should just give us that kind of that wrapper around it. But once again, you can see the password is just in the text here. And in a real application, like once we deployed, theoretically, someone could just go inspect the content of this file and then find it. Most people aren't going to do that. So it's an adequate a first step if you're concerned about that.
Right. I know we have other questions around, can we get analytics through the prototype and all the goodness around it? I know in the course you go into like, you can add authentication for people to log in, a payment link even, and also analytic insight as well.
Yeah, exactly. So one really great thing about this that is different from Figma, like, I mean, one, if you don't have skills in Figma, this is obviously cool already. Like me, I can't really design in Figma. So just being able to prompt my way through designs is pretty awesome, just to express my own ideas. But yeah, let's say you do actually want to, get some feedback on this from users, like deploy to a link, get analytics. You can use any product analytics solution you want because once again, this is actual code. So my recommendation is typically Posthog for this because Posthog is a pretty generous free tier. But if you want to use mixed panel, amplitude, Pendo, segment, like whatever tooling that you like or want to use, you just set that up on the prototype, and then you can collect click metrics, recordings, whatever it is that you're interested in. And then yeah, this is the the lovable one. So once again, I picked a very simple prototype just for the purpose of showing you that generally speaking, they all do the same thing. You will get different performance or different results as the prototypes get more complicated. So maybe we'll do that next. I'll do this one here. So I have this Figma mock of LinkedIn that looks pretty much exactly like LinkedIn for all of you who are familiar with the LinkedIn analytics page. And we're going to try to do this one here. So I'm going to work through the exact same process. I'm just going to go copy link to selection. I'm going to open up a new Bolt project. And then I'm going to import this from here.
And technically, Colin, you can just take a screenshot of that and paste it and ask it to create exactly that UI, and that will work too, right? As a
starting point. Yeah, that's right. So you can start from Figma or a screenshot. I will say that the Figma import process tends to have better results when we're talking about literal one-to-one matching than a screenshot. Again, you can try this yourself. Like the best way to learn is to experiment a little bit on your own. But yeah, you'll probably see that like I can get this to look almost identical to LinkedIn, whereas from a screenshot, it usually requires a bit more prompting, a little bit more cleanup, that type of stuff in order to get it closer.
Interesting. So even in Figma itself, right now, it's a screenshot inside Figma, but because it's a Figma file.
This is not a screenshot, actually.
Oh, this is not a screenshot. Okay, so you do have the components and etc. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
That makes sense.
And in case people are curious how I got this, there's Chrome extensions where you can export websites to Figma. So if you start thinking a little bit here about the workflows, you can export your existing website to Figma if you don't have Figma mocks already for some reason, and then convert that into Bolt and then keep going with new ideas from there. And that whole process would probably take you about 5 minutes in total.
That's how everybody's able to recreate Twitter, a new version of Twitter in like less than an hour or something. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, here's what we got. There's obviously some layout issues, right? So like from here, we'd still have to clean this up. Maybe we'll do that a little bit. I'll just show you a quick example of one other tool here. So we have like this inspector on the right-hand side. We can select different UI elements within here. So I wanted to like inspect or select this element and say, I'll move this down a bit. I could, and all that good stuff. What I'm going to do before I do that is actually I'm just going to pop it out to a full view because I just want to make sure that, if I'm going to be changing the layout, I understand what it looks like. So yeah, this is definitely too high up on the right-hand side. And then, the background colors on these cards should be white. So let's start with that. And yeah, one other thing I'll mention about the Figma import process that's different from starting from a screenshot is that the tooling that we're using will decide how to organize the code. You might not think that how the code is organized really matters because we're more focused on, this visual aspect, but how the code is organized is actually extremely important. A good example of this is that like we have this top navigation bar here, right? And if we look at the code, we might not find that it's actually considered to be a component where you normally store like all the little Legos that we'd want to reuse in our application. And so if we were to build a second screen, it might be harder for us to get it to match exactly. So do basic things like, oh, the nav bar is going to be in the same position at the top. And so that's just one kind of like, I guess, disclaimer that this isn't magic. And that, if you take the Figma import process, what you'll find is that it's much easier to get something that matches one to one. But sometimes it can be harder to make something that you can continue to extend over time to, lots of different features. You'll put more effort into like just basic things like getting this to work.
Yeah. And then, Colin, I think I got probably 5 questions asking what is the magical clone extension that you use to
Sure.
reproduce the website?
Yeah. So there's more than one. The one that I use is called HTML to design. But there's more than one. So you can find whichever one you like the most. If you just Google like, something along the lines of like website to Figma or HTML to Figma, you'll find that there's a couple of options available to you.
Right.
Yeah, and maybe we'll just clean this one up just for the sake of, making one that actually looks good. So if I go back to my preview here, you see, once again, I wasn't specific enough in my prompt to make the background colors of the cards white. What I should be saying is more specific. So I can, say, let's select that div and say, make all card backgrounds white. I'll say something along the lines of the website background should be tan/gray. All cards should be white. This includes weekly sharing tracker, analytics. Is there anything else in here? Creator tools. So yeah, you'll see. Normally, like when I go through this process, I have some other methods of being more specific without me having to type everything out all the time. This is some of the stuff I teach in the course. But you'll see that like the more specific you are, the better results that you get. So now, we have something that looks closer. This positioning is still off, so why don't we fix that? We'll say, can you move this down by, I'll just say 300 pixels because that's probably right. And then the only last thing is that the cards are too wide. So we'll have to fix that as well.
Colin, do you have to specify like the design need to be like responsive to the screens and stuff like that?
Yeah, usually, again, if the Figma layout is using auto layout, which is a feature in Figma, it will be responsive automatically. If it's not, then you have to kind of go through and clean it up as I am here. So yeah, can you set the max width on all cards to, let's just say 600 pixels. And I'm just guessing here. As you can see, like I said 300, that was maybe a bit too far. You could, you don't have to use the language I'm using. You could say like, move it down a bit. But again, you're being less specific. And so you're going to get less specific results, right? So even this, that probably wasn't quite right, 600. So you have to play around with a little bit of, the exact design system or designs that you're using here. I probably squeezed that in a little bit too far. But yeah, so I'll just show you one last example here, just because I did get this working pretty nicely. I spent a little bit of time to clean this up the other day. So let me just grab my other one and we'll try it from there. I think it was this one here. Let's see. I have as you can tell, I have a lot of bulk projects, and so it's a little bit tricky for me to remember which one was it. There you go. Yeah, so this is the one I spent a little bit more time cleaning up, and yeah, we get that kind of like one-to-one match in terms of the design. And if I look back through the prompts, you can see it's a lot of the same stuff, right? So I'm talking about the major differences, this has a max of 800 pixels instead of 600 and so on. So me cleaning up the design is basically what all these prompts are here.
So, Colin, there were earlier question I thought it was pretty interesting. So, for people who are working on like enterprise, like SaaS, grade product, do they have a choice to deploy, let's say, to a private cloud so that it's less of a public accessible prototype?
Yeah, so at the moment, no, not directly through these tools. You can only deploy through basically the tooling that it has. One thing I will say is you can export the code, so this requires a bit more technical expertise or depth, but you can take this code, get it hosted internally, and then share it, however you want to. You probably have to work with an engineer to figure out the workflow for you to do that. But yeah, no really like good options right now in terms of deploying from these tools to private clouds.
And then there was also another question around, so we've seen like how to recreate websites and stuff, but technically you can also build an app, out of this. I knew I created a little mini trivia game using this, is creating screen by screen. So what's your advice on like someone who wanted to create like a end-to-end prototype of an app?
Yeah, so just to kind of refer back to our little diagram here that Lenny put together, you have two options primarily. Like one is when we talk about app, I just want to clarify, like there's literal mobile apps, right? So we'll talk about that in a second. And then there's functional web applications, like a little side project, as you mentioned. So when it comes to building those side projects, you're going to need all three sets of tiers, so client, server, and database, and then to deploy your website to the internet, right? Your database is necessary to store data. So if you're building whatever to-do app or whatever it is, obviously you want to store the user's items over time. So my personal preference here is Replit, just because Replit supports all of these things kind of in one bundle. You don't have to use external tools. V0, Bolt, and Lovable all support a third-party tool called Supabase that can give you databases and other things that you need. It works, generally speaking. I'm not going to say it doesn't work, but sometimes you can find that there's issues with Supabase itself. And again, if you're not technical or you've not used Supabase before, it can be difficult to troubleshoot them. And so that's one advantage that I think Replit has, is because it has everything together. You can basically ask the agent like, hey, help me with my database. And it can not only see that you have a database, can also run commands to look at all the content of your database. You can make changes to the database itself. So yeah, I would probably say Replit is the best tool for that. In terms of mobile apps, Replit and Bolt both support building mobile applications. I will say, like, the tooling is very new and not super stable. I've done it a couple of times, and it requires a lot more troubleshooting than web applications right now. So you can give it a try, but mobile applications, I would not expect that you're going to ship something to production with a mobile app right now using these tools.
Right. And Colin, I know when I first started, I asked the same question as Jesse. If Replit is so powerful, why not start with it? If it does it all, like why bother with V0,
Sure.
Boats, and Lovable? Yeah.
Yeah, this is a great question. I think like you really have to get clear on the use case that you have for using the tool, and then pick the tool for the job. So one disadvantage Replit has is because it handles everything, there's more complexity in the code that it writes. So what I mean by that is, like, every single time you build a project, it's always going to have a client and a server and have some storage, like a database, versus Bolt, which you can literally just have a client, just what you see on the screen, just the view. And as you're working with these AI tools, you'll notice that the more code there is, the worse they do. And so if you don't want a full stack application, having less code is better. So therefore, like, using Bolt or V0 is better if you're just trying to build that prototype for the visual communication aspect. Whereas if you want to build a real project, then yeah, you're going to want to pick Replit. So it just depends on the use case.
Yeah, I resonate with that because when I was building my little trivia game, I think Replit really struggled with the UI. I spent more time debugging how to make the UI looks like responsive with simple design than I'm actually spending building the actual like application itself. So
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Cool. And I think I've covered most of it. So we talked about Figma deploying. We talked a little bit about debugging and prompts. Yeah, the last thing I was going to mention was just team adoption. So one thing that you'll maybe come away as a conclusion here is like, okay, this is really cool as an individual. I can go through this process, either with a screenshot or a Figma mock, prototype something, and then add on top and use that to communicate my ideas. One interesting thing here is that you can actually do this with your team as well. So if we go back over to like, I'll do this one here, this report generator. If we had like a team license for V0, we can actually create a copy or a fork. And now I have a copy of that original one and I can keep adding to it over time. So if you imagine for a second that like someone on your team takes the time to build a baseline, which is just your Figma mock, and then whenever you want to test a new feature, all you do is click copy and then use the prompt and add on top. It's even less time, like per idea, right? Now you can spend 5 minutes to add your new idea on top rather than spending like half an hour to get everything look correct at the beginning. Using this like forking workflow is extremely powerful. So this is like maybe a bit more advanced. If you've never used these tools before, you wouldn't have encountered this problem yet. But you will run into the problem where like you're redoing the work over and over again to get to that baseline design. And so rather than continuing on the baseline design, like adding your new feature on top, pause when you're done the baseline, click fork, and then add the new feature on top of the copy. And then whenever you want, go back to the original and just create more copies of it.
I really like that forking feature, Colin. I know someone asked earlier, I don't know if you faced this problem before, but for like enterprise, do you think uploading a Figma file into a third-party application like this is violating, you know? So
Sure.
basically you have like corporate enterprise design floating in the crowd and like this third-party tools. Like, have you had client that mentioned like concern about that?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely a valid concern. So, generally speaking, the questions that enterprise folks ask is around like privacy, security, is the AI training on my data, that kind of stuff. Again, if you purchase an enterprise license with, V0 or Bolt or whomever, that's part of what you're purchasing, right? That's the difference between like me signing up for the free plan and, the company purchasing an enterprise license is that they provide in the contracting assurances around these types of things. So yeah, I think it's okay for like, if you want to test out the idea at work, you should probably check with your manager first. That's probably good advice in general. But yeah, just to keep that in mind that like there is a way to solve that problem. It's just enterprise licensing. And if you want to adopt this as an actual workflow at work, maybe find a way to do like a proof of concept. Something super simple, maybe something public like your homepage or something people can interact with anyway. And then from there, demonstrate the value and then think about the enterprise approach.
Right. And then we call this a prototype for a reason. So it is a prototype to demonstrate the value. But have you seen like teams pushing it to make it like a working software?
Yeah, so not in an enterprise setting. I think this is a really important point and something that like sometimes gets missed when we're talking about these AI coding tools is that there's a massive difference between what we're doing and like what goes into building a production enterprise system. A good example of this very simply is testing. So engineers write unit tests which test the code that they wrote to make sure that it works properly. We will never create a unit test when we're doing prototyping because one is we don't really know how, we don't know how to run them, and they don't really have a lot of value when we're using it as a communication device. And so yeah, I would not use any of these tools for the purpose of shipping code to production in an enterprise or an existing product. I will say Cursor is better for that type of thing. So a tool that is a code editor that an engineer can use that has AI features makes sense, but using a third-party tool outside of your existing code base, it doesn't really make sense.
That makes sense. Okay, we're coming up on time pretty fast. So it's always so much fun talking to Colin and seeing all this prototype. I learn a lot, some of the nuances, even beyond the course, but I'm sure there are a
Yeah.
lot more covered in the course. So for folks who are interested, please check out Colin's course on Maven. It's starting in April. Colin, I have last two questions. I think one is a hot take. One is a
Sure.
more practical, like day-to-day, how can PM, leverage this? Let's start with the hot take. So Andre Kapathi recently coined this term vibe coding. And so you just kind of like talk to them, use voice detection and code with voice. And then you kind of like never check the code again, just like accept all changes. And, you build something without even looking at the code or knowing how to code. In a world where everybody can build anything, what do you
Yeah,
think is going to happen? Like, what are some of your hot takes in this space?
sure. Actually, this is a really fun question because for PMs specifically, or honestly, I'll say even engineers and designers, when you work in an existing company, you have distribution basically handed to you, right? So like, you work at Netflix and you want to ship a new feature and you ship the feature and all of a sudden there's millions of people using your feature, right? And you maybe even like, you did the monetization side. And so like you figured out the margins and the benefits and you did the financial modeling and you made all this money for Netflix. That's great. When you go to do it yourself, you don't have any of that distribution. Like it doesn't exist. You're just sitting in a room by yourself. And so that is like the hardest part. And it's always been the hardest part, to be honest. Like I don't think programming has ever been the thing that necessarily made successful companies. And I think we all know that kind of intrinsically. So yeah, I don't think necessarily just because you can make things, it means that you'll be successful. I think a lot of the product skills that we talk about, like just normally in product management, are extremely important. And thinking through like, how are you actually going to distribute this product? How are you going to get people to be aware of the product? You know, what is the pricing? All that good stuff um, is extremely important. So, and one last thing to add here is I actually don't think we're at a point yet where anyone can build anything. Like the tools still have to get better because they make mistakes all the time. And I see some messages in the chat like, oh, I tried this thing and it doesn't work and blah, blah, blah. That is a very normal experience and like something that you need to get better at through understanding how the tools work. But yeah, I don't think we're quite there yet.
Yeah, I like that. It's like even if you can build anything, it's more important that like what's the right thing to build and can you get the access to the right audience to use that tool. And I resonate with like, yes, for the trivia game, I think I spent 85% of my time debugging
Yeah.
than the actual building to make it work. Now, Colin, then flipping, as many of the folks here are PMs or aspiring PMs or existing PMs or founders, what are some practical advice on a day-to-day basis that you think that PM should think about AI prototyping? Obviously, checking out your course is one of them, but
Sure.
like, what else? In terms of selling the vision, storytelling, or how often should they try this, or like any practical tips on like how to integrate this into their workflow?
Yeah, I think the easiest part about this whole thing is trying it. So you should do that because it's free. So literally you can just sign up for an account, put the prompt in, see how it goes, get some experience. Like, yeah, to figure out how the tools work a little bit for yourself. And I don't think anything beats firsthand experience, to be honest. Like you can watch me do it, you can watch, someone else do it. It just doesn't compare to firsthand experience. And so, yeah, I definitely do that. In terms of like PMs, I think the primary value prop is communication, as I mentioned, either with engineering, design, or users. And I really think users are the place where you have an opportunity to like provide a lot of value. And this is the workflow that I've seen some teams use already, which is you have like a PRD that you start with. And from that PRD, you go and create a prototype and you hand it to a user. And you prototype on top of your existing application, either through Figma or screenshots. So you make it feel like your app, you add the new feature and you hand it to the user and you start asking them questions about basically like, standard like user testing stuff. But the thing is like by doing that, you've taken like potentially 3 to 6 weeks out of the development process because in order to get to the same result in your actual product where you can actually demo it with a user, the engineering team needs to ship it first, right? The design team needs to like sign off on the design first. Like all those things have to happen. All those teams have to be involved. Whereas if you can just go and test it, you'll find out like, should we even ship this feature, right? You can start asking the questions that actually matter. And so to me, that's like right now, the primary value prop of these tools is getting in front of users extremely early in the process, validating that what you're going to build actually has the value that you think it does, and then using that prototype as an artifact afterwards with your teams to say like, okay, we showed this to users. Here's how they interacted with it. These are the questions that they had. Here's the revisions that we made. This is what we're going to implement. And you get that loop like extremely early in the process rather than waiting 6 weeks for the first iteration, right? So
I think it's actually bring out the best of like the whole lean startup or best of product management, rapid prototyping, feedback. Colin, maybe I think you sort of already answered it, but maybe I just bring it out because I sometimes hear it from friends who work at, let's say, a traditional company or like a smaller startup. Right now, there's a lot of anxiety, especially around software engineers, around, wow, what do I do? Like, I think Mark Zuckerberg literally made like some comments about like how tools like Cursor can actually replace senior software engineers. So let's say from a change management perspective, from a human perspective, sometimes you work in a team and maybe the PMs are a little more advanced, like attended this session, feeling super, jazzed about trying out this tool. And then maybe when you show it to your engineers, maybe they're like a little bit like, whoa, what are you doing? Have you seen that? Like, how do you manage that? What are some like advice to get them at least as excited or open to this new process?
Yeah. I would say like try to bring people along with you. And this is just generally like good advice. If you're a PM and like you've ever tried to make a change in your team's process, Like you don't just like say like, hey, we're going from, I don't know, waterfall planning to 2 week sprints, and you have to do it because I said so, right? Like it's just that's not going to go well with your engineering team or any of the other stakeholders that you have to manage. So yeah, like find a small practical way to try this, right? And then bring people along with you. So say like, hey, I heard about this new approach of doing things. I think it's going to have these benefits. Don't focus on the technology specifically. Like that's a big mistake. I think is like, oh, it's AI, so it's going to work. It's like I think we can get in front of our users faster and get better feedback. And so this is what we're going to try. I'd love to like do this with you if you guys want to try this little experiment. We're going to prototype this one little feature we had on our roadmap and just see what people think if it works, right? And then hopefully what happens is it does work and people are excited about it, and you can kind of like build that, internal excitement for this new way of working rather than trying to force it upon people.
Yeah, I love that. I love not focusing on the technology because you get caught up. You'll get into a fight with engineers because you can't
Yeah,
talk about technology. But I love the benefit of like how fast we can get in front of the users. Maybe invite engineers to hear feedback from the user and etc. Just again, coming back to the fundamentals of good product management.
right.
Thank you so much. Again,
Yeah,
folks, I know that 71 of you have scanned the QR code to check out Colin's courses just now. So this is very exciting. Yes, this session is recorded. You can either access it just through the same link of what you're viewing on LinkedIn right now, but we will also send out recap articles, recap emails for those who are coming from Maven. And if you subscribe to our newsletter with the Substack link below, you will also get recap of today's demo as well as key takeaways. But thank you so much, Colin, for joining us today and share so much
yeah,
pearls of wisdom.
yeah. Hopefully it was useful for everyone. Obviously, continue to follow along. The space changes very quickly, so yeah. But I guess if to leave like one piece of advice, just try it. That's my one piece of advice. Just try
Don't
it.
overthink, just
Don't
try it.
overthink it. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Colin. And thanks, everybody. Hope you had a great time. See you at future sessions.
Thanks all.
Bye.